Come now, children of the red earth and the weeping river. Draw near to this low fire, where embers still hold the warmth of those who couldn't speak their truth. I am the old one who carries the name of nobody and everybody. The one who heard the moans in the ship's belly, who felt hot iron on flesh before even being born. My grandfather crossed that middle passage with chains on his ankles and songs on his lips. My mama saw her babies torn from her arms at the auction block like they was chickens at market. I carry these voices in my worn throat, and today I tell you about Bella of the Thorns. Bella didn't come into this world with a flower's name. She was born on some forgotten plantation in the deep south, where cotton bled white and the whips sang louder than birds, skin the color of wet night, eyes that seemed to carry the darkness of the ocean that swallowed her grandfolk. From girlhood she carried the weight, picked, washed, cooked, endured Massa's hungry stare and Missis's slaps. But inside her burned a flame even the overseer couldn't snuff out. A quiet flame, patient, sharp as a razor hidden in its sheath. The setting was the common hell of those days. The big white house with columns pretending purity. The damp quarters smelling of sweat and mold. Fields stretching like open wounds under merciless sun. Massa was one of those who called himself Christian on Sundays and devil the other 6 days. Name was Elias Thorn, man with soft hands and stone heart, who liked marking his property with iron and fear. He saw in Bella not a woman, but an object that dared have will of its own. When she refused to lay with him for the umpteenth time, when she spit on the ground instead of lowering her eyes, punishment came heavy. 70 days. 70 days locked in a thorn cage he himself ordered forged. Twisted iron shaped like a cage, with barbs turned inward sunk into the stable ground. No roof, just sky to witness the suffering. Day and night the thorns bit her flesh. Back, arms, thighs, face. Blood ran and clotted. Flies had their feast. Hunger gnawed from within, thirst burned her throat. But Bella didn't scream for mercy. She sang low hymns nobody taught her, spoke with ancestors who came on the wind, transformed pain into armor. 70 days became legend among those who worked in darkness. The woman iron couldn't bend. On the 70th day, Massa came to see what remained of her. Opened the cage with rough laughter, thinking he'd find begging. But Bella rose, thin, covered in scabs and scars, but whole in spirit. With strength only those who've touched bottom find, she grabbed the very iron of the cage, that same iron that imprisoned her, and in a turn that seemed danced by the Orishas, she impaled Massa on his own torture instrument. Iron pierced his chest like paper, and white man's blood soaked the earth he'd exploited so long. Here's the promise of this story, my grandchildren. It ain't just revenge Bella leaves us. It's the certainty that the body can be chained, wounded, locked in thorns. But the spirit never surrenders. Long as there's one Bella of the Thorns, there'll be those who transform pain into blade, cage into oppressor's tomb. Listen well. Chains still rattle in many places, but iron that binds today might be iron that frees tomorrow. And when strong wind blows, listen. It's her singing still, calling those who come after. She was 14 summers old when they branded her face. Lord have mercy, 14. Just a slip of a girl with hands too small for the weight they made her carry, and eyes too knowing for the cruelty she'd already witnessed. Name was Bella then, though some in the quarters whispered she'd been born with another name. An African name her mama kept locked deep in her chest like stolen silver. The crime? Stole herself a heel of bread. Not even a full loaf, just the burned end piece Massa's hounds wouldn't touch. But her mama lay sick in the quarters, fever burning so hot you could feel it 3 cabins down, and little Bella couldn't watch her waste to nothing. So she crept into the big house kitchen before first light, when even the cook hadn't stirred yet, and took what mercy wouldn't give. Overseer Jones caught her coming back through the morning mist. Man had eyes like a hawk and a heart made of Mississippi clay. Hard, red, and good for nothing but holding hate. He dragged her by her hair straight to Massa's study, where Elias Thorn sat drinking his morning whiskey like it was mother's milk. "Got us a thief, Massa," Jones said, voice full of that cruel satisfaction overseers get when they catch what they've been hunting. Little nigger gal stole from your own table. Now listen here, children. What happened next? I tell it true though it burns the tongue. Massa Thorn looked at young Bella standing there trembling, bread still clutched in her fist, and something passed across his face that weren't just anger. Was something worse. Was the look a man gets when he sees something he wants to possess, to break, to own down to the marrow. Thieving is a serious matter, he said slow, swirling his whiskey. Can't have my property stealing. Sets a bad example for the others. He stood, walked around her like she was livestock at auction. But she's young yet. Got potential, this one. Strong-backed for her age. The iron came from the fireplace where it had been heating. Overseer Jones held her down on the floor. Took 3 grown men to hold that child still, while Massa himself pressed hot metal to her left cheek. The scream that tore from Bella's throat that morning. Folks say it scattered every bird from here to the county line. The smell of burning flesh mixed with the bread she still wouldn't let go of. And when they finally released her, she stumbled out into the yard with Massa's initials, E.T., seared permanent into her young face. She made it to the quarters before her legs gave out. Her mama, sick as she was, dragged herself from the pallet to catch her daughter. "My baby," she whispered, tears mixing with the salve she tried to spread on that awful wound. "My sweet baby girl." But Bella didn't cry no more. Something in her had gone cold and hard during that burning. She looked at her mama with eyes older than her years and said, voice steady as stone, "I got the bread, mama, you gonna eat." The old ones in the quarters, the root women and the elders who remembered Africa, they saw what happened to Bella that day. Wasn't just her face got marked. Was her spirit too, but not in the way Massa intended. That iron didn't break her. It forged her into something sharp and patient. For 3 days, Bella tended her mama with that bread and what little water she could steal. She cleaned the wound on her own face without flinching, without asking for help, without speaking to anyone. The other folks in the quarters watched her move through the darkness like a ghost, and they whispered, "That child ain't right no more," some said. Suffering done touched her too deep. But the old conjure woman, Mother Zara, who lived in the last cabin where the quarters met the woods, she saw different. That girl been kissed by iron and fire, she told anyone who'd listen. Mark my words, she gonna be somebody Massa wishes he never crossed. On the 4th morning, Bella woke to find her mama cold beside her. The fever had taken her in the night, quiet as morning dew. Bella sat there in the dim light filtering through cracks in the cabin walls, her mama's hand still in hers, and didn't make a sound. Just sat and sat until the overseer's bell rang for field work. The other women tried to help prepare the body, but Bella pushed them away, gentle but firm. "I'll do it," was all she said. "She my mama. I'll tend her." That evening, after picking cotton till her fingers bled, Bella dug her mama's grave herself. Wouldn't let nobody help. Dug it deep in the colored cemetery past the tobacco barn, where the earth was red as blood and just as unforgiving. She wrapped her mama in the one good cloth they owned and laid her down with the heel of bread, now molded, placed on her chest. "You tried, mama," Bella whispered into the dirt. "You fought hard. Now you rest." As she filled in the grave, the sun set behind the big house, and its shadow stretched long across the quarters like a stain. Bella stood there with dirt under her nails and grief carved fresh in her heart, and she turned to look at that white-columned house glowing in the dusk. Massa Thorn stood on the veranda with his evening cigar, watching. Even from that distance, Bella could feel his eyes on her, assessing, calculating, wanting. The brand on her face throbbed like a second heartbeat. She didn't look away, didn't lower her head. Instead, she spoke to the dying light, to her mama's fresh grave, to the ancestors she could feel gathering in the spaces between things. "One day I gonna make you bleed." The words hung in the air soft as cotton seeds, deadly as nightshade. Massa Thorn couldn't hear them across the yard, but somewhere deep in his bones he felt them and shivered despite the warm Georgia evening. In the quarters that night, folks couldn't sleep easy. They felt it too. something had shifted. The girl with the burned face had made a promise, and promises spoken over fresh graves carry weight. Mother Zara lit extra candles and muttered prayers in a language older than English. The children huddled close to their mamas. The men sharpened what few tools they had, though they couldn't say why. And Bella? She lay on her pallet staring at the ceiling, her hand pressed against the mark on her face. The pain had settled into a permanent ache, a reminder that would never fade. But she welcomed it. Let it feed the cold fire growing inside her chest. "I gonna make you bleed," she whispered again into the darkness. And the darkness, thick with spirits and memory, seemed to whisper back, "Yes, child. Yes, you will." 5 years done passed since that burning iron kissed Bella's face. 5 years of rising before dawn to the overseer's bell, of cotton bowls that cut fingers raw, of sun so hot it could cook a soul from the inside out. She was 19 now, woman grown with shoulders strong from carrying burdens, and eyes that hadn't softened none since her mama died. The mark on her face had healed into a raised scar, ET still clear as the day it was burned there. Some folks said it made her ugly. Others whispered it made her fearsome. Bella didn't care either way. She wore that scar like armor, reminder of what she'd survived and what she swore she'd do. Massa Thorn, though, Lord have mercy, that man's interest in her hadn't cooled none. If anything, it had grown hotter than forge fire. He watched her in the fields from his horse, watched her at the well drawing water, watched her walk back to the quarters at day's end. His eyes followed her like hands reaching where they had no business being. The other enslaved folk noticed. How could they not? "That girl in trouble," the women muttered over washing. Massa got his eye on her something terrible. The men stayed quiet but watchful, knowing there wasn't nothing they could do against a white man's want without bringing hell down on everybody. The overseer knew too. Jones had gotten meaner over the years, if that was possible. More liberal with the whip, quicker to anger. But when it came to Bella, he held back just enough. Not out of kindness, no sir. Out of understanding that she was marked for Massa's special attention, and a smart overseer didn't damage goods the boss man wanted intact. The plantation ran on routine brutal as clockwork. Up before sun showed its face, out to fields wet with dew and heavy with yesterday's heat trapped in the earth. Pick till your back screamed and your fingers bled. Water break at noon if you lucky, if Jones feeling generous. Pick till sundown painted the sky colors too pretty for a place built on suffering. Then back to quarters for whatever meal the old women could scrape together from rations meant to keep you alive but never full. Sunday's supposed to be for rest and Jesus. But that was white folks' Sunday. For the enslaved, it was mending clothes, tending garden plots, stealing whatever hours you could to remember you was human and not just Massa's mule. It was on a Tuesday when things shifted. Hot day even for Georgia summer. The kind of heat that made you see things wavering in the air like spirits trying to take form. Bella was in the cotton field, moving down her row mechanical, her mind somewhere else like it always was these days. She'd learned to let her body work while her spirit roamed free, visiting places Massa's chains couldn't reach. She didn't hear him ride up till his shadow fell across her. "Bella," Massa Thorn's voice, smooth as snake oil. "Come here, girl." She straightened slow, wiping sweat from her brow, careful not to look directly at him. That was the rule. Don't look white folks in the eye. Makes them nervous, makes them cruel. But something in Bella resisted that bowing, even if her body went through the motions. "Yes, Massa?" Her voice flat as hammered tin. "I got a task for you up at the house. Mrs. needs help with the evening meal." He paused, and she could feel his gaze crawling over her like ants on rotted fruit. "You clean yourself up at the well first. Can't have you tracking field dirt into my house." The other pickers kept their heads down, but Bella knew they was listening. Everybody always listening in the quarters, gathering information like it was currency. "Yes, Massa." She set down her picking sack and started walking toward the big house, her spine straight despite every instinct screaming at her to run. At the well, she washed quick and thorough, scrubbing field dirt from her arms and face with the harsh lye soap they was allowed. The water was cool from deep earth, and for a moment she let herself imagine it was some African river her grandfolk had known. Before ships, before chains, before everything got stole, Mother Zara appeared like smoke, the old conjure woman moving quiet despite her years. She pressed something small and hard into Bella's palm, a mojo bag made of red flannel filled with roots and who knew what else. "Keep this on you," Zara whispered, her voice urgent. "Protection. He gonna try you tonight, child. I seen it in the smoke." "I know," Bella said, calm, pocketing the charm. "Been knowing it was coming. You carrying anything sharp?" Bella's hand went to her waistband where she'd sewn a small blade stolen from the smithy 6 months back. Kept it sharp as prayer and close as sin. "Always." "Good girl." Zara's old eyes searched Bella's face. "But listen here, you use that blade tonight, ain't no going back, you understand? They'll hang you from the nearest tree and call it justice. Some things worth dying for. And some things worth living for, too. Revenge a patient mistress, child. Don't throw yourself away on the first battle when there's a war to be won." Before Bella could answer, the overseer's voice cut through the evening. "Bella, Massa waiting." She walked to the big house as dusk settled purple and heavy. Cicadas sang their evening chorus, and somewhere a whippoorwill called out lonesome. The house loomed white and ghostly, its windows glowing orange with lamplight like the eyes of some enormous beast. The back door led to the kitchen where Aunt Ruth, the head cook, worked over the stove. Old woman looked up when Bella entered, and her face went tight with knowing. "He in the dining room," Ruth said quiet. "Want you to bring him his supper." She handed Bella a tray laden with food fit for kings while folks in the quarters gnawed on cornmeal mush. "Bella, baby, you watch yourself here?" "I hear." The dining room was all dark wood and silver candlesticks. Table long enough to seat 20, though Massa usually ate alone since Mrs. had taken sick and stayed upstairs most days. Elias Thorn sat at the head of the table, jacket removed, sleeves rolled up casual. "Set it down here," he said, gesturing to the space in front of him. "Then pour my wine." Bella did as told, moving with careful precision. Her hand on the knife in her waistband burned hot as her brand. She poured burgundy wine into crystal that probably cost more than any enslaved person would see in 10 lifetimes. "You grown into quite a woman, Bella." His voice had that thickness men's voices get when they want something. "Despite that mark on your face, some might say because of it, makes you memorable." She didn't answer. Didn't trust her voice not to shake with rage or fear or both. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you." Bella raised her eyes, met his gaze straight on, and in that moment, she let him see everything she'd been hiding for 5 years. The hate, the promise, the absolute refusal to be broken. The room went cold despite the summer heat. Massa Thorn's hand froze halfway to his wine glass. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't this. Wasn't eyes that looked at him like he was already dead and just didn't know it yet. "You forget your place, girl," he said, but his voice had lost its smoothness. "No, Massa." Bella's words came out quiet, deadly. "I know exactly where I stand." He stood then, chair scraping loud against wood floor, came around the table toward her, and Bella's fingers closed around the knife handle. Her heart beat like African drums in her chest, calling to ancestors, calling to her mama's spirit, calling to every enslaved soul who'd ever stood at this crossroads between submission and resistance. "I could have you whipped for that insolence," he said, close enough now that she could smell whiskey on his breath. "Could have you sold down to Louisiana where they work you to death in 2 years. Could have you—" "Could," Bella interrupted, and the word hung between them sharp as her hidden blade. "But you won't. And why is that? Because you want me willing." The truth laid bare. Because Massa who got to break his property can't enjoy it same as Massa who gets what he wants easy. And because somewhere deep in your heart, you scared of what I might do if you try to take what I ain't giving. His hand came up fast, striking her across the face, the branded side. Pain exploded hot and fresh like it was 5 years ago all over again. But Bella didn't fall, didn't cry out, just stood there with blood welling from her split lip, eyes still locked on his. And then she smiled, a terrible smile that showed teeth and promised violence. Massa Thorn stepped back like she'd slapped him instead. "Get out," he said, voice strangled. "Get out before I do something we'll both regret." "Yes, Massa." Bella turned and walked toward the door, shoulders back, head high. She left the knife in her waistband but kept her hand near it. At the threshold, she paused. Didn't turn around, just spoke to the shadows gathering in the corners. "One day soon, Massa. One day real soon, you gonna wish you'd listened to what that scared part of you was trying to say." She walked out into the night, leaving him alone with his fear and his rage and his unholy want. Behind her, she heard the crash of wine glass against wall, the bellow of a man who just realized he didn't have as much control as he thought. The quarters was quiet when she returned, but folks was waiting, sitting on porches, leaning in doorways, eyes asking questions mouths couldn't. Bella walked straight to her cabin without speaking to nobody. Inside, she finally let herself shake, let herself touch the knife still pressed against her ribs, let herself wonder if Zara was right, if patience was smarter than striking now. But even as she wondered, she knew. Knew like she knew her own name, like she knew the taste of grief, like she knew the weight of chains on souls, if not bodies. Massa Thorn wasn't done with her. Tonight was just the first move in a game where the stakes was higher than life or death. The stakes was whether she'd die as property or live long enough to die as somebody who'd made the master bleed. Outside, the night pressed close and heavy, and somewhere in the darkness, she heard it. The low, mournful sound of a whippoorwill crying its lonesome song. Warning or promise, she couldn't tell. Maybe both. Tomorrow was coming, and with it, whatever reckoning Massa Thorn was building toward. Bella lay down on her pallet and kept the knife close, her hand pressed to the brand on her face like a compass pointing toward her destiny. The iron had marked her once, but next time iron sang, she'd be the one holding it. Sleep didn't come that night. Bella lay still as death on her pallet, listening to the quarters breathe around her, the snores of exhausted field hands, the cry of babies who didn't know yet what kind of world they'd been born into, the whispered prayers of the old ones who knew too well. Dawn broke red as blood across the Georgia sky. Bad omen, the elders would say. Sky the color of warning. The overseer's bell clanged harsh and early, dragging folks from whatever rest they'd managed to steal. Bella rose mechanical, splashed water on her face from the bucket by the door, tied her head wrap tight. Her fingers brushed the mojo bag Mother Zara had given her, still tucked safe against her skin. In the field, the work was the same as always. Bend, pick, drag the sack, move down the endless rows of white that looked pure but was stained with suffering. The sun climbed hot and merciless. Bella's hands moved automatic while her mind circled like a hawk over what had happened, what was surely coming. She felt eyes on her all morning, the other pickers stealing glances, quickly looking away when she met their gaze. They knew something had shifted, could smell it on the air like smoke before fire. Noon came without water break. Jones rode his horse slow between the rows, whip coiled at his side like a sleeping snake. When he reached Bella, he stopped. "Massa want to see you," he said, voice flat. "At the house now." The picking sacks went still. Every ear in that field tuned to what would happen next. Bella straightened, cotton bowl still clutched in her bleeding fingers. "I ain't finished my row. Don't make me say it twice, gal." She dropped the cotton slow and deliberate, wiped her hands on her dress, started walking toward the big house with Jones following on his horse, close enough that she could hear the animal's breathing, smell its sweat mixing with the overseer's meanness. Massa Thorn waited on the veranda, dressed fine like he was receiving important guests instead of summoning enslaved women. Behind him, through the open door, Bella could see the missus's shadow moving upstairs, present but powerless, or maybe just unwilling to see what her husband truly was. Bella. He said her name like he owned it, like he owned everything about her. "We need to finish our conversation from last night." "Wasn't no conversation, Massa. Was you talking and me listening." His jaw tightened. "You got a smart mouth for someone in your position." "My position?" Bella's voice stayed level, but rage burned underneath like coals. "What position that be, Massa? The one where I'm property you can do whatever you want with? Or the one where I'm still human enough to say no? Jones shifted on his horse, hand moving to his whip. The air went thick as molasses, heavy with violence waiting to be born. "Come inside," Massa said, quiet. Dangerous quiet. "We gonna settle this private." "No." The word fell like stone down a well. Simple, final, irrevocable. Massa Thorn's face went red, then pale, then something worse than both. "You refuse me?" "I refuse you." "You know what happens to slaves who refuse their masters?" Bella met his eyes straight on, and in hers he could see his own death looking back at him. Not today, not tomorrow, but coming sure as seasons. "I know what happens to men who think they can take what ain't freely given. I seen it in my dreams, Massa. Seen it clear as I see you now." His hand went to the pistol at his belt, but Jones spoke up quick. "Massa, we got witnesses. All them pickers watching from the field." Thorn's hand dropped, but his voice shook with barely controlled fury. "Take her to the torero. Strip her back. 20 lashes. No, 30. I want every slave on this plantation to see what happens to those who forget their place." Bella didn't fight as Jones dismounted and grabbed her arm rough enough to bruise. She walked to the torero, the open space between the big house and the quarters where Massa held his cruelest lessons, with her head high and her fear locked deep where nobody could see it. They was already gathering the others, pulling folks from fields, from gardens, from whatever tasks they'd been assigned. Old and young, man and woman, children who shouldn't have to witness but would anyway because Massa wanted them to learn. Jones tied her hands to the whipping post. That old gnarled oak that had seen so much suffering, its bark, was stained dark with old blood. He tore her dress down to her waist, exposing her back to the afternoon sun and the gathered crowd's horror. Bella closed her eyes, thought of her mama, thought of the ancestors who'd survived Middle Passage, thought of every enslaved soul who'd stood where she stood now and refused to break completely. The whip sang its terrible song. Once, twice, 3 times. Fire exploded across her back, pain so bright it turned the world white. But Bella didn't scream, bit down on her own tongue till it bled, tasted copper and salt, and didn't give Massa the satisfaction of her voice breaking. 10 lashes, 15, 20. Her back was ribbons, blood running down to soak into her dress, into the earth that had drunk so much enslaved blood it couldn't hold no more. At 30, Jones finally stopped. Bella hung from the post, consciousness flickering like a candle in wind. She heard Massa's voice from somewhere far away. "Let her hang there till sundown. Let everybody see, let everybody remember." Through the haze of pain, Bella forced her eyes open, found Massa in the crowd of overseers and house slaves. And with the last of her strength she spoke, voice hoarse but clear enough for those closest to hear. "You'll never have me willing, Massa. And one day soon, one day real soon, you gonna wish you'd killed me today when you had the chance." His face went white. She saw it. The flash of fear, the recognition that he'd made a powerful enemy and chained her close instead of destroying her when he could. "She threatens me," he sputtered to Jones. "You all heard. She threatens her master." But nobody spoke. The crowd stood frozen, caught between terror and something else, something that looked almost like hope, flickering dangerous in the eyes of those who'd forgotten what hope felt like. Bella let her head drop, conserving what little strength remained. Blood dripped steady from her back, each drop a promise falling to the Georgia clay. The sun beat down merciless, and pain sang through every nerve. But underneath it all, that cold fire in her chest burned steady. She'd said no, had refused, had stood at the crossroads and chosen her path even knowing the cost. And somewhere in the space between consciousness and darkness she felt them, the ancestors gathering close, the spirits of the resistant and the rebellious, the ones who died fighting rather than live kneeling. They whispered in languages older than English, sang songs that predated ships and chains. "Hold on, daughter, hold on. Your time is coming." The sun crawled across the sky slow as judgment, while Bella hung from the whipping post, and the plantation held its breath. waiting to see if the girl with the burned face would survive long enough to make good on her promise. Sundown came slow and terrible. When they finally cut Bella down from the whipping post, she collapsed like a rag doll, unconscious from pain and sun exposure. 2 women from the quarters carried her limp body back to her cabin while Massa watched from his veranda, whiskey glass in hand, face unreadable. For 3 days, Bella lingered between this world and the next. Mother Zara tended her with poultices made from roots and prayers older than memory, while other women took turns sitting vigil, keeping the flies off her ruined back, dripping water past her cracked lips. "She burning up with fever," Aunt Ruth whispered on the second night. "Infection done set in deep. Lord have mercy, this child gonna die." But Zara shook her head firm. "No, death don't want her yet. She got work to do here first." On the 4th day, Bella's eyes opened. The fever had broken, leaving her weak as a newborn but alive, sharp alive, angry alive. "Easy, child," Zara cautioned as Bella tried to sit up. "Your back still healing. Them wounds go deep." "How long I been down?" 3 days. Massa been asking after you every morning. Ain't sure if he hoping you live or die." Bella's laugh came out bitter as poison. "He want me alive. Dead, I'm just a loss of property. Alive, I'm his shame walking around reminding him he can't break me." That same afternoon, while Bella was taking her first shaky steps around the cabin, the smithy fired up his forge. Big Tom was his name. Massive man with shoulders broad as a barn door and hands that could bend iron bars. He was the plantation's blacksmith, making tools and wagon repairs and whatever else Massa needed. Today, Massa needed something different. Jones brought the order from the big house and Tom read the specifications with growing horror. "This ain't right," he muttered, showing the paper to his apprentice, young Samuel. "This ain't nothing but torture made manifest." "What Massa want?" Samuel asked. "A cage." Tom's voice heavy as the iron he worked. "But not just any cage. One made of thorns, iron spikes bent inward, farpas sharp enough to cut just from breathing wrong. Barely big enough for a person to crouch in. No roof, no floor, but dirt." "Lord have mercy," Samuel breathed. "Who that for?" They both knew. Everybody on the plantation knew. Massa's obsession with Bella had turned into something monstrous, and this was his answer to her refusal. Not death, but suffering stretched out long and public. Tom had no choice but to forge it. A slave refusing Massa's direct order was death, quick and certain. So he heated his forge hotter than usual, and with tears streaming down his face that hissed when they hit the hot metal, he began to shape Bella's prison. Took him 4 days to complete it. 4 days of bending iron rods into spikes, welding them into a cage barely 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide. Every spike was sharpened to a cruel point, angled inward so that any movement would mean fresh wounds. The door was designed to lock from outside, the whole structure anchored to wooden posts that would be driven deep into ground. On the night he finished, Tom sat in his own quarters with his head in his hands. "I built that girl's tomb," he told his wife. "Built it with these hands that used to build plows for planting. Lord gonna judge me harsh for this." "You ain't got no choice," his wife soothed, but her voice was hollow. "We always got choice. Sometimes it just costs more than we willing to pay." The next morning they erected the cage in the stable yard, visible from both the big house and the quarters, positioned where everybody would see, where Bella would have no privacy, no dignity, no escape from the elements or from eyes. Massa Thorn stood watching as Jones and 2 other overseers anchored it firm. He ran his hand along the spikes, testing their sharpness, nodding with satisfaction when one drew blood from his finger. "Perfect," he said. "Bring her." They dragged Bella from her cabin before she'd fully healed. Her back was still scabbed and tender, and the rough handling tore some wounds fresh. She didn't fight. What was the point? But she walked under her own power, refusing to be carried like she was already defeated. The gathered slaves watched in horror. Children buried their faces in their mothers' skirts. Men clenched their fists, helpless. The old ones swayed and hummed low spirituals, calling on ancestors and God both. Mother Zara pushed through the crowd, tried to reach Bella, but Jones blocked her with his horse. You want to join her, old woman? Zara fixed him with eyes that had seen too much. You mark my words, Overseer. What you doing here today gonna come back on you threefold. The spirit's watching, and they keep accounts. Get back to work, all of you, Jones shouted at the crowd. Show's over. But nobody moved. They stood frozen, witnesses to something that would mark them all. Massa Thorn addressed Bella directly. You refused me. You threatened me. You forgot that I own every breath you take. This cage is your new home. You'll stay here till you learn proper humility, till you understand your place, till you beg me for mercy. Bella met his eyes. Even now, torn and wounded, she met his eyes. I'll die first. We'll see. He nodded to Jones. Put her in. They shoved her into the cage. The space was so small she had to crouch, unable to stand or sit comfortably. The spikes pressed close on all sides. If she leaned back, they bit her shoulders. If she shifted forward, they threatened her knees. The only position was a half-crouch that would exhaust muscles within hours. The door clanged shut. The lock clicked home. Bella felt the first spike bite into her upper back where it was still healing. Felt another press dangerous against her right thigh. Every breath had to be measured, calculated, or metal would drink more of her blood. Massa Thorn leaned close to the cage. 70 days, Bella. That's your sentence. 70 days to think about what you did, to reconsider your stubbornness, to learn that I am master here, not you. 70 days, Bella repeated, voice steady despite everything. I'll count everyone. And on the 71st day, Massa, you better watch yourself. His face darkened, but he'd said his piece. He turned and walked back to the big house, and Jones dispersed the crowd with his whip, cracking it in the air like thunder. But Bella saw before they scattered, saw Big Tom's tears, saw Mother Zara's hands moving in patterns of protection, saw children's eyes wide with horror, and adults' faces set with impotent rage, saw her people witnessing her suffering and being unable to stop it. The first day in the cage was fire. Every muscle screamed. Every movement brought fresh cuts. The sun beat down with no shelter, and when night came, the cold settled in with no blanket. But on the third day, something shifted. Bella stopped fighting the cage and started understanding it, started finding the narrow spaces between spikes where she could rest small parts of her body for brief moments, started developing a rhythm of shifting weight that minimized new wounds, while old ones scabbed over. And on the third night, when the plantation slept and only the owls in the nightjars sang, Bella began to sing too. Low and quiet at first, in a language she didn't know she knew. Words from before ships, before chains, before everything got broken and scattered. The sound drifted across the stable yard, reached the quarters where folks lay sleepless. It wasn't a plea for help, wasn't a cry of pain, it was a calling, a summoning. An invitation to something older than Massa's cruelty, deeper than his iron cage. And in the darkness, invisible to all but those with eyes to see, shadows began to gather, drawn by Bella's song, by her blood soaking the Georgia clay, by a promise made over her mama's grave that wouldn't die no matter how much iron Massa used to try to bury it. Days 10 through 30 in that iron hell blurred together like fever dreams. Bella's body adapted in ways that shouldn't be possible. Skin hardening where spikes pressed constant, muscles learning to hold positions that defied nature. But it was her mind that traveled furthest, slipping loose from the cage that held her flesh. The sun rose and set, rose and set. Rain came on day 12, soaking her to the bone, turning the dirt floor to mud that sucked at her feet. The spikes rusted slightly, their bite turning from clean cuts to ragged tears. Bella tilted her head back and drank the rain straight from the sky, grateful for water that didn't come from Massa's hand. On day 15, the vision started. At first she thought it was just delirium from hunger and pain. Massa had ordered minimal food, cornmeal mush once daily, water twice if Jones remembered, barely enough to keep a soul tethered to a body. But these weren't hallucinations born of starvation. They were visitors. The first came at twilight when the world turned that peculiar shade between day and night, when spirits can slip through easier. An old woman appeared just outside the cage, visible but not quite solid, like she was made of smoke and memory. She wore clothes from another time, patterns Bella recognized from somewhere deep in her bones. "Nana?" Bella whispered, though she'd never met her grandmother who died on the middle passage. The woman smiled, sad and knowing, spoke in a language that wasn't English but that Bella understood perfectly. "You are not alone, daughter. We who crossed the water in chains, we who died before we could be free, we walk with you still." More came as the days passed. Men with tribal marks scarred into their faces, women with eyes that held oceans of grief, children who never got to grow old. They gathered around the cage like moths to lamplight, drawn by Bella's suffering and her stubborn refusal to surrender. They taught her things: how to breathe through pain till it became something else, something almost like power. How to speak to the iron, to understand its nature and its weaknesses. How to transform her cage into a sacred space, a hush harbor that Massa's cruelty couldn't penetrate fully. "Pain is a doorway," one spirit told her, an elder with scars that told stories of resistance. "You walk through it enough times, you learn what's on the other side." "And what's that?" Bella asked through cracked lips. "Freedom of a kind they can't chain. Freedom that lives in here." The spirit pressed a translucent hand to where Bella's heart beat stubborn and strong despite everything. "They can cage the body, daughter. But the soul? The soul learns to fly." The enslaved folks in the quarters noticed the change in Bella around day 20. She stopped wincing when spikes bit deeper, stopped crying out even in her sleep. Her eyes took on a quality that wasn't quite human anymore. Something ancient looked out from behind them. At night, they crept close to the cage when overseers slept. Brought water in hollowed gourds, scraps of food wrapped in leaves. Herbs Mother Zara prepared that dulled pain without dulling mind. They moved silent as shadows, risking everything to offer what little comfort they could. Big Tom came on day 23, his huge frame moving surprisingly quiet. He knelt by the cage, couldn't meet Bella's eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Lord forgive me, I built this thing that's killing you." "You ain't killing me, Tom." Bella's voice was hoarse but clear. "Massa trying to kill me. You just surviving like we all surviving." "Don't feel like enough. It never does. But you here now. That's something." He pressed a piece of cornbread through the spikes fresh from his wife's skillet. Bella ate it slow, savoring the kindness more than the food. Young Samuel came on day 26, the smithy's apprentice barely 16. He brought water and news from beyond the cage. "They talking about you everywhere," he said, voice full of wonder and fear both. "Even on other plantations. Say there's a woman at the Thorn place who won't break, who sings to spirits in the night." "What they say about that?" Bella asked. "Some say you touched by God. Others say you dealing with the devil. I think—" He paused, worked up courage. "I think you just showing us what it means to be free even when you ain't." On day 30, everything shifted. A child came to the cage in broad daylight. Little Moses, only 7 years old, too young to understand the full danger. He clutched a biscuit stolen from the big house kitchen, determined to share it with the woman who'd become legend. He didn't see Overseer Jones until it was too late. The whip came down fast and brutal, catching Moses across his small back. The boy's scream cut through the afternoon like a knife through flesh. He dropped the biscuit, tried to run, but Jones was faster. Grabbed him by his thin arm, dragged him toward the whipping post. "No!" Bella's voice rang out sharp. "He just a child. Let him be." Jones turned, face twisted with mean pleasure. "This what happens when slaves forget their place. Even the young ones need to learn." What happened next, folks still talk about in whispers. Jones tied little Moses to the post, same post Bella had hung from, and raised his whip high. But before he could strike, the boy collapsed, sudden and complete. Just crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. The plantation doctor, a white man who usually tended only Massa's horses and hounds, was called. He examined the child and shook his head. Heart gave out. Sometimes happens with the young ones. Weak constitution. But Bella knew better, saw what the doctor couldn't see. the spirits that had gathered around Moses, that had taken him gentle before Jones could inflict worse, saw her grandmother's ghost cradling the child's soul, carrying it away to some place softer than Georgia clay and iron cages. Moses's mother wailed grief that echoed across the plantation. They buried him that evening in the colored cemetery, another small grave in ground that held too many. Bella stopped eating after that. For 3 days she refused even water, her lips moving in constant prayer or curse. Nobody could tell which. The spirits gathered thicker around her cage, visible now even to those without the sight. Folks swore they saw lights flickering in the stable yard at night, heard voices singing in tongues nobody living spoke. Mother Zara came on the 3rd night of Bella's fast, pushed past whatever fear kept others away. "Child, you trying to die?" "Maybe." Bella's voice was barely a whisper. "Or maybe I'm trying to become something Massa can't kill. That boy's death ain't on you, ain't it? He came because of me, because I became something for folks to hope in, and hope in this place just another way to suffer. No." Zara gripped the cage bars, heedless of how spikes bit her palms. "You listen to me, Bella. That boy's death was on Jones and on Massa and on every white man who built this evil system. You ain't responsible for their cruelty, but you might be responsible for showing us how to survive it, how to keep our souls when they trying to take everything else." Bella finally looked at her, really looked, and saw tears streaming down the old conjure woman's face. "You hear me?" Zara insisted. "Don't you dare give up now. Don't you dare let them win by dying in this cage. You got 40 more days. You're gonna make it through all 70, and then you're gonna do what you promised. You're gonna make that man bleed." Bella's fingers, thin as bird bones now, reached through the spikes to touch Zara's hand. "I hear you, Nana. Good. Now drink this water and eat this root. We got work to do yet, you and me." That night, Bella ate, drank, let her body remember it wanted to live. And the spirits gathered closer still, whispering secrets that would serve her well when the 70 days were done, and iron sang its final song. Massa Elias Thorn stopped sleeping right around day 35. His wife noticed first, heard him pacing the floors at night, muttering to himself, drinking more whiskey than even his considerable habit usually required. She'd ask what troubled him, but he'd wave her away with irritation that bordered on violence. Truth was, the dreams had started. Every night when he closed his eyes, he saw Bella. Not the broken, wounded creature he'd intended to create, but something else entirely. In his dreams, she rose from the cage whole and terrible, iron spikes transforming into a crown of thorns that glowed red as forge fire. Her eyes burned with a light that wasn't quite human, and her voice when she spoke could shatter glass and splinter wood. "The iron that binds me will pierce your heart," she said in every dream, voice echoing like it came from multiple throats. "You marked me with your brand, but I'll mark you with your own cage." He'd wake gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, reaching for his pistol before remembering it was just a dream. Just a dream. But it felt more real than waking, more true than the daylight hours when he pretended everything was under control. On day 40, he rode out to the cage for the first time since putting her in. Had avoided it, truth be told, sending Jones to check on her, to ensure she hadn't died and wasted his investment. But the dreams drove him finally to confront what he'd created. What he found shook him deeper than any nightmare. Bella sat in that impossible space with a stillness that defied nature. Her body was skeletal now, skin stretched tight over bones, covered in scabs and half-healed wounds. But her eyes, Lord have mercy. Her eyes blazed with an intensity that made him take a step back despite himself. "Come to check on your handiwork, Massa." Her voice was rough as gravel but strong, too strong for someone who should be broken by now. "I came to see if you learned anything." He tried to sound authoritative, but the words came out uncertain. "Oh, I learned plenty." Bella shifted slightly, and even that small movement should have driven spikes deeper. But she moved like she'd made peace with the iron, like she and the cage had come to some unholy understanding. Learned that cruelty got limits, but resilience don't. Learned that you can cage a body, but not a spirit. Learned that you more afraid of me than I ever been of you. I'm not afraid of you. You're property. A slave who forgot her place. Then why you shaking, massa? And it was true. His hands trembled where they gripped his riding crop. Why you got circles under your eyes like you ain't sleeping? Why you keep looking over your shoulder like something following you? You're imagining things. Delirious from pain. Bella laughed and the sound was wrong, too knowing, too old for her years. I ain't imagining the nightmares you having. I send them to you. Every night I sit here in the dark and I think about you, massa. Think real hard about what's coming. And the spirits, they carry them thoughts straight to your dreams. His face went pale. That's devil talk, hoodoo nonsense. Is it? She leaned forward until a spike pressed against her collarbone, drawing fresh blood that ran down slow. Or is it just your guilty conscience finally catching up? How many of us you hurt, massa? How many women you forced? How many children you sold away from their mamas? How many men you worked to death in these fields? Shut your mouth. But the command had no force behind it. The iron remembers, Bella continued, her voice taking on that strange quality it got when the spirit spoke through her. This cage you made to break me? It's been counting your sins. Each spike is a tally. Each drop of my blood is a witness. And when the 70 days are done, massa, all them sins gonna come due at once. Elias Thorn wanted to walk away. Wanted to ride back to his big house and pour another whiskey and pretend this conversation never happened. But his feet wouldn't move. He stood frozen, caught in Bella's gaze like a rabbit before a snake. You want to know what I learned most of all? She asked, voice dropping to barely a whisper that somehow carried clear across the space between them. I learned that the iron that holds me now is the same iron that gonna set me free. And when it does, massa, when these 70 days are up and you think you've won, that's when you'll understand what real fear is. He found his voice finally, though it cracked like a boy's. You're threatening me? Still? Even in that cage? Ain't no threat, massa. It's a promise. Same promise I made over my mama's grave. Same promise I make every morning when the sun rises and every night when it sets. The iron that marked my face gonna be the iron that pierces your heart. Something in how she said it, with absolute certainty, like she was stating simple fact rather than hope or fantasy, made his blood run cold. He'd seen that look before, on the faces of rebels before they were hanged, on runaways right before they'd rather die than be taken. It was the look of someone who'd already made peace with whatever came next. I could kill you right now, he said, hand going to his pistol. Put a bullet through your skull and end this. Go ahead. Bella spread her arms as much as the cage allowed, inviting it. But you won't, because killing me quick would be mercy and you ain't built for mercy. You want to break me. But massa, she smiled, teeth white against her dark skin. I'm already broken in all the ways that matter. And all them broken pieces, they sharp as these spikes, sharp enough to cut you deep when the time comes. He pulled his pistol, aimed it at her head. His finger trembled on the trigger. For a long moment, the only sound was his ragged breathing and the distant call of mockingbirds in the trees. Then he lowered the gun, holstered it with shaking hands. 30 more days, he said, voice barely steady. 30 more days and we'll see who's broken. Yes, massa, we surely will. He rode away fast, whipping his horse harder than necessary, desperate to put distance between himself and those knowing eyes. But he could feel her watching him all the way back to the big house, could feel her presence like a weight on his shoulders that wouldn't lift. That night, he drank himself into unconsciousness. But even drunk, the dreams came. And in every one, Bella rose from iron and blood and Georgia clay, transformed into something that made him understand. Too late, far too late, that some people you can't break because they're already been through worse than anything you can imagine. And those people got nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. In the cage, Bella settled back into her half-crouch position, fresh blood drying on her skin. The spirits gathered close, humming approval. He's scared now, she whispered to them. Good and scared. But not scared enough yet. Come day 70, we're gonna teach him what real fear is. and the spirits hummed their agreement, their voices rising and falling like wind through thorns, like chains dragging across stone, like the accumulated rage of generations finally finding voice through one woman who refused to die before her work was done. 30 days left. 30 days for Massa Thorn to drown in his nightmares. 30 days for Bella to prepare for the reckoning that was coming, sure as sunrise, inevitable as death. Days 45 through 55 brought change that nobody could have predicted. The weather turned violent like the sky itself had taken sides in Bella's struggle. Storm clouds gathered thick and black on the horizon, rolling in from the west with thunder that sounded like God clearing his throat before pronouncing judgment. The rain started on day 47, and once it started, it didn't stop. Not for 8 days straight. Water came down in sheets so heavy you couldn't see 10 feet ahead, turning the plantation into a river of red mud, flooding the low-lying cotton fields, making the slave quarters leak like sieves. But nowhere did the rain fall harder than on Bella's cage. With no roof, no shelter, she took the full force of every drop. Within hours, she was soaked through, shivering despite the warm Georgia summer turned cold and gray. The water pooled at her feet, mixing with blood from fresh wounds, turning the cage floor into rust-colored mud that sucked at her ankles. The iron spikes, already dangerous, became something worse. Rain made them slick, unpredictable. Rust bloomed on their surfaces like disease, making their edges ragged instead of clean. Every movement risked tearing rather than cutting, and torn flesh healed slower, invited infection faster. On day 49, the fever came back. Bella felt it rising like floodwater from somewhere deep in her bones. Heat that had nothing to do with summer. Chills that shook her so hard the spikes cut deeper with each tremor. Her vision blurred, and the line between waking and dreaming dissolved like sugar in rain. The spirits came different during fever. More solid, more insistent. Her grandmother sat beside the cage as if iron bars were no barrier at all, humming songs in that language Bella understood without knowing. "You close to the edge now, daughter," the old woman said, voice sad and proud both. "Close to the place where the living and the dead shake hands." "Am I dying, Nana?" Bella's voice was a whisper lost in rain. "We all dying, child. Question is what we do with the time between breaths. You ready to cross over, or you got more fight left in you?" Through the fever haze, Bella saw things that hadn't happened yet. Saw herself rising from the cage, saw Massa Thorn's face twisted in his final moment, saw blood, so much blood, mixing with Georgia clay. Saw fire consuming the big house. Saw enslaved folks running toward something that looked like freedom, but might have been just another kind of cage. "I see it," she gasped. "See what's coming. See the end of it." "You see a possibility," her grandmother corrected. "Future ain't fixed till it happens, but you on the right path. The hard path, but the right one." Other ancestors gathered close, forming a circle around the cage that kept the worst of the rain off. Not all of it. Enough still got through to keep her soaked and shivering, but enough to mean she wouldn't drown in that iron tomb. They whispered encouragement in a dozen different languages, laid translucent hands on her that carried warmth the living world couldn't provide. On day 51, Mother Zara came through the storm, wrapped in oilcloth against the rain, moving with the determined waddle of an old woman who wouldn't be stopped by weather or white men's rules. She carried a bundle wrapped in waterproof canvas. "Drink this," she commanded, pressing a bottle through the spikes. All of it, every drop. The liquid inside tasted like earth and bitterness, like something that had been buried and dug up and shouldn't be consumed by living mouths. Bella drank it anyway, trusting the conjure woman's knowledge more than her own comfort. "What is it?" she asked when the bottle was empty. "Fever break tea, but more than that, it's a bridge. Keep you tethered to this world while your spirit does what it needs to do in the other." Zara's old eyes were fierce in the stormlight. "You having visions, ain't you? Seeing things? All the time now. Can't tell what's real and what's spirit anymore. Good, that's good. Means you close to understanding what you need to understand." Zara gripped the cage bars despite how the rain-slick metal cut her palms. Listen to me now, Bella. In them visions, you learning the cage's secrets, where it's weak, how to break what can't be broke. The ancestors teaching you what you need to know for day 70. You pay attention here. I hear, Nana. And one more thing. Zara pulled out a second item from her bundle, something that glinted dull even in the dim stormlight. A nail. Long and thick, the kind used to shoe horses. You keep this. Hide it where they can't see. When the time comes, you'll know what to do with it. Bella took the nail, pressed it into the mud at the cage's edge where spikes and shadows hid it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you walking free and Massa Thorn paying for what he done. The old woman straightened, bones creaking. 20 days left, child. Storm gonna pass, but you gonna be stronger when it does. Fever gonna burn out the weakness, leave only what's hard and sharp behind. She melted back into the rain, leaving Bella alone with her fever, and her visions and the ancestors who crowded close. The storm raged 3 more days. Lightning struck so close Bella felt electricity make her hair stand on end, smelled ozone mixing with rust and blood. Thunder shook the ground like the earth itself was protesting what was happening on its surface. During the worst of it, on day 53 when the rain came sideways and the wind howled like all the hounds of hell, Bella had the clearest vision yet. She saw herself not as she was, broken, caged, bleeding, but as she would be. Saw herself standing tall with the cage door hanging open behind her, iron bar in her hands still wet with Massa's blood. Saw the other enslaved folks gathering. Saw them making a choice between submission and rebellion. Saw some run, saw some stay, saw some fight. And she saw the cost. Saw bodies hanging from trees. Saw the big house burning. Saw cavalry coming with guns and ropes and righteous fury. Saw that freedom, if it came at all, would be bought in blood and paid for in death. Is it worth it? She asked the storm, the ancestors, the universe itself. All this suffering, all this death, is it worth it just to make one white man bleed? Her grandmother's voice came clear through the thunder. It ain't about one man, daughter. It's about showing them, showing everybody, that we ain't property, that we got agency and dignity, and the right to say no. One person standing up, refusing to break, refusing to bow, that ripples outward. That changes things in ways you can't see yet. The fever broke on day 55 with the storm. Bella woke to sunlight, weak and watery but real, breaking through thinning clouds. Her body felt different. Lighter somehow, though she'd lost more weight. Harder, though her flesh was torn and scarred. The iron spikes that had been her torture became something else during those fever days. Became familiar. Became known. She pressed against one deliberately, testing. It bit her shoulder, but she understood the angle now, the pressure, the way the metal wanted to move. In her delirium, she'd been studying her prison at a level deeper than thought, learning its secrets the way a prisoner learns the rhythm of their chains. 15 days left. 15 days to heal enough to be strong. 15 days for Massa Thorn to drown in nightmares. 15 days for the ancestors to finish teaching her what she needed to know. The rain had washed away some of her blood, but not her promise. That stayed etched in iron and bone and Georgia clay, waiting for the 70th day when everything would change. Day 69 arrived with a stillness that felt wrong. After the storm's fury, the sudden calm pressed heavy on the plantation like a held breath. Birds sang cautious, insects hummed uncertain, and the enslaved folks moved through their work with the tension of people waiting for something terrible or wonderful, or both. Bella sat in her cage, transformed. The woman who'd been thrown in 70 days ago was gone. What remained was something harder, sharper, refined by suffering into a weapon that breathed and thought and remembered. Her body was skeletal, every rib visible, arms thin as kindling. But her eyes, sweet Jesus, her eyes burned with a fire that made even Jones keep his distance when he brought her evening water. Massa Thorn hadn't visited since that day he'd almost shot her. But his nightmares had gotten worse, according to the house slaves who heard him screaming at night, who saw him drinking before noon, who watched him pace the veranda like a caged animal himself. Tomorrow, the missus told Aunt Ruth in the kitchen, her voice carrying worry. "He says tomorrow he's letting that girl out. Says he's proved his point, established order. But Ruth," she lowered her voice to a whisper, "I see how he looks toward that cage. Like he's the one imprisoned and she's the jailer." The word spread through the quarters faster than fire through dry grass. Tomorrow, day 70, the end or the beginning or something in between. That night, the enslaved folks couldn't sleep. They sat on their cabin steps, gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed voices about what might come. Some prayed for peace, others prayed for justice. A few prayed for blood. Mother Zara visited the cage one last time, moving through darkness with the confidence of someone who'd made peace with whatever spirits walked the night. "You ready, child?" she asked, kneeling by the iron bars. "I'm ready." Bella's voice was rust and gravel, but steady as stone. "You remember what I taught you? About the nail? About the weak points?" "I remember everything, Nana. The fever burned it into me permanent." Zara reached through the spikes, touched Bella's face gentle despite the roughness of her own work-worn hands. "Whatever happens tomorrow, know that you already won. They tried to break you and couldn't. That's victory right there. Victory ain't enough. I want justice. Justice and revenge, two different things. Maybe. Or maybe they the same thing, just wearing different clothes." Bella's fingers found the nail still hidden in the mud, cold and solid and waiting. "He gonna pay for what he done. To me, to my mama, to all of us." "I know, child, I know." Zara pulled back, joints creaking as she stood. "The ancestors be with you tomorrow. They've been preparing you for this since the day you entered that cage. Trust them. Trust yourself. And when the moment comes, don't hesitate." She disappeared into the darkness, leaving Bella alone with her thoughts and her rage, and the spirits that had become more real to her than the living world. Bella didn't sleep that last night in the cage. Instead, she meditated on everything the fever visions had shown her, everything the ancestors had taught. She touched each spike methodically, learning which ones had rusted through at their base from 70 days of rain and blood. Found 3 that wobbled when she pressed just right. Located the weak points in the cage's structure that Big Tom had built into it. Whether intentionally or not, she'd never know, but they were there. Most importantly, she practiced the motion she'd need. The grab, the twist, the strike. Over and over in her mind until it became muscle memory. Until she could do it blind and half dead, and still hit true. Dawn of day 70 broke red again. Sky the color of warning, the color of blood, the color of endings and beginnings. The plantation woke to an atmosphere so tense it felt like the air itself might crack open. Massa Thorn dressed careful that morning, according to the house servants. Put on his finest suit like he was going to church or receiving important guests. Strapped on his pistol and checked it twice. Drank 3 fingers of whiskey before leaving the house, hands shaking so bad he spilled half of it. Overseer Jones gathered the enslaved folks, all of them, even the children, even the sick. Brought them to the stable yard to witness whatever was about to happen. They came silent as ghosts, faces showing nothing but eyes revealing everything. Big Tom stood near the front, massive hands clenched into fists. Mother Zara positioned herself where she could see clearly. Young Samuel, the smithy's apprentice, clutched a hammer he'd brought from the forge. For what purpose, he couldn't say, but his hands needed to hold something. Massa Thorn approached the cage slow, each step deliberate. He'd imagined this moment for weeks, the triumph of finally opening that door, of seeing Bella crawl out broken and submissive, of proving to everyone that he was still master here. What he saw when he looked into the cage stopped him cold. Bella crouched there like something feral, something that had forgotten how to be human and learned instead to be pure will-made flesh. Blood and mud caked her skin, scabs covered wounds that would never fully heal. But she met his eyes with an intensity that made him step back involuntarily. 70 days, Bella, he said, voice not quite steady. Your sentence is complete. You ready to come out? Ready to show proper humility? Bella's lips pulled back from her teeth in something that wasn't quite a smile. Oh, I'm ready, Massa. Been ready since the day you threw me in here. He fumbled with the lock, fingers clumsy with whiskey and dread. The mechanism clicked open. The door swung wide with a creak of rusted hinges. For a long moment, nobody moved. The gathered enslaved folks held their collective breath. Even the birds went silent. Then Bella began to rise. It should have been impossible. After 70 days crouched in that impossible space, her muscles should have been atrophied, useless. She should have collapsed the moment she tried to stand. But the ancestors had been preparing her, teaching her body to hold on to strength even as it wasted away. She unfolded like a switchblade opening, slow, deliberate, deadly. Blood ran fresh from wounds torn open by the movement, but she didn't stop, didn't waver. Just kept rising until she stood full height for the first time in 10 weeks. Massa Thorn watched with growing horror. This wasn't the broken slave he'd expected. This was something that had been forged in that iron hell, tempered by suffering into a weapon designed for a single purpose. "Now, Bella," he said, hand moving toward his pistol. "Let's not do anything foolish. You're free of the cage. That's what you wanted, isn't it?" Bella took one step forward. The motion sent agony screaming through every nerve, but she welcomed it. Let it feed the cold fire that had sustained her through 70 days of torture. "What I want," she said, voice carrying clear across the silent yard, "is what you owe me. What you owe all of us." Her hand shot out faster than seemed possible, grabbing one of the cage's main support bars, the one she'd identified weeks ago as loosened by rust and rain. With strength that shouldn't exist in her wasted frame, strength that came from somewhere deeper than muscle, she wrenched it free. The iron bar came away in her hands, 3 feet of rust-covered metal still sharp where it had been mounted, still wet with her own blood. Massa Thorn's eyes went wide. He clawed for his pistol, but fear made him slow. Bella was faster. She moved like water, like wind, like divine retribution given form. The iron bar sang through the air in an arc that had been practiced 1,000 times in visions, that had been ordained by ancestors who died in chains dreaming of this moment. The bar found its target with terrible precision, piercing through suit coat and silk vest and soft white flesh, driving home exactly where her grandmother had shown her in fever dreams. Straight through his chest, through his heart that had never known mercy, pinning him to the very cage that had held her. Elias Thorn gasped, eyes bulging with shock and pain, and the final understanding that he'd been wrong. So terribly wrong. You couldn't break some people. You could only make them sharper. The silence that followed Massa Thorn's death was absolute. Not a breath, not a whisper, not even the wind dared move. The plantation itself seemed to hold still, witnessing what had just happened, what couldn't be undone, what would change everything. Elias Thorn hung there against the cage that had held Bella, the iron bar through his chest pinning him like a specimen. His eyes stared sightless at the Georgia sky, mouth open in permanent shock. Blood ran down the rusted metal, mixing with Bella's blood still staining it, creating a stream that fed the red clay earth. Bella stood before him, swaying slightly, every muscle screaming but her spirit flying free. She'd done it. The promise made over her mama's grave, the vow sworn in pain and rage, fulfilled. The iron that marked her face had become the iron that pierced his heart, exactly as prophesied. Overseer Jones broke the silence first, going for his whip and pistol both. "She killed Massa, she killed—" But Big Tom moved faster than a man his size should have been able. His massive hand caught Jones's wrist, twisted it hard enough bones cracked. The pistol fell to the mud. The whip followed. "No," Tom said, voice carrying across the yard like thunder. "No more." Something shifted in that moment. The invisible chains that had held the enslaved folks in place for generations, chains made of fear and conditioning and the certain knowledge that resistance meant death, those chains started breaking. Not all at once, not for everyone, but enough. Young Samuel grabbed the hammer he'd been clutching and stepped forward. Then another man, then another. Women too. Kitchen workers still holding knives. Laundry women with washboards that could crack skulls. Field hands with cotton hooks sharp as any blade. They formed a loose circle around Bella, protecting her even though she looked like she might collapse any second. The spirits of the ancestors swirled thick in the air, visible now to everyone whether they had the sight or not. Translucent figures humming approval, reaching out to touch the living with encouragement that felt like fire in the blood. "What happens now?" someone asked. Might have been Aunt Ruth, might have been Mother Zara. Hard to tell with everyone speaking at once, the confusion and fear and exhilaration mixing together. Bella turned to face them. These people who'd witnessed her suffering, who'd brought her water and food in the dark, who'd kept her alive through 70 days of hell. Her voice came out hoarse but clear. "Now we choose." "Choose what?" Samuel asked, eyes wide. "Whether we run or whether we fight. Whether we scatter to the winds hoping for freedom on the Underground Railroad, or whether we make a stand here." She gestured toward the big house looming white and silent. "Mrs. in there probably already sending word to neighboring plantations, to the paddy rollers, to anyone who'll come with guns and ropes. We got maybe an hour, maybe two before this place is swarming with white men wanting vengeance." "Then we run," someone shouted. "We take this chance and run." "And go where?" Mother Zara's voice cut through the panic. "You think they won't hunt us down? You think killing a white man goes unpunished? They'll track us with dogs, hang us from trees, make examples that'll terrify every enslaved person from here to Virginia." "So what then?" Big Tom asked. "We stay and die here? Maybe." Bella met his eyes. "Or maybe we fight. Maybe we take this plantation and everything in it. Maybe we burn it to the ground so complete there's nothing left but ashes and memory. Maybe we make such a stand that folks talk about it for generations. About the day the enslaved rose up and said no more." "That's suicide," Jones gasped from where Tom still held him. "You're all dead, every one of you." "We already dead," Bella said simply. "Been dead since the day we was born into chains. At least this way we die choosing our own deaths instead of waiting for you to work us into early graves." The crowd murmured, uncertain. Some nodded agreement. Others looked toward the woods, calculating distances and dangers. Children clung to their mothers, not understanding but feeling the weight of the moment. Then the missus appeared on the veranda, pale as death, clutching a rifle that shook in her hands. "You stay right there," she screamed, voice breaking. "I've sent for help, the militia's coming. You'll all hang for this." Bella looked at her. This white woman who'd lived in luxury, built on suffering, who'd closed her eyes to her husband's cruelty, who'd benefited from evil even if she hadn't wielded the whip herself. "Then we'll hang," Bella said. "But not before we're free for 1 day, 1 hour, 1 minute. Not before we taste what it means to say no and make it stick." She turned back to the gathered enslaved folks. "I ain't telling nobody what to do. You want to run? Run. I won't judge. Survival is its own kind of resistance, but me?" She looked at the big house, then at the cotton fields stretching to the horizon, then at the cage still holding Massa's body. "I'm staying. I'm taking what's ours by right of blood and suffering. Who's with me?" For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Big Tom released Jones and stepped forward. "I'm with you. Built that cage with my own hands. Time to tear down everything else I built for them." Samuel followed. "I'm with you." Mother Zara, old as she was, stepped up. "Been waiting 70 years for this day. I'm with you." One by one they chose. Not all. Some slipped away toward the woods, carrying children and what few possessions they had, seeking the North Star and whatever freedom they could find. Nobody blamed them. Nobody tried to stop them. But enough stayed. Enough angry, desperate souls who decided that one day of rebellion was worth whatever came after. Bella looked at them, this makeshift army of the broken and the brave, and felt something crack open in her chest. Not her body breaking, but her spirit expanding, making room for hope she'd thought died with her mama. "Then let's begin," she said. "The house first. Take what's useful, burn what's not. The fields next. Every cotton plant destroyed, every tool broken. We got till sundown maybe, then the militia comes. We use every minute." They moved as one toward the big house, and the missus fired her rifle wild, hitting nothing. The sound echoed across the plantation like a starter's pistol, beginning a race that could only end one way. Behind them, Massa Thorn's body hung from the cage, testament to what happened when you tried to break the unbreakable. The iron had turned. The blade had found its mark. and for one brief shining moment, the enslaved had become the masters of their own fate. Whatever came next, death, capture, or some impossible freedom, they'd face it knowing they'd chosen. That was worth everything. Now I'm gonna tell you the end of it, though the end ain't really an ending at all. Some stories don't stop and they just keep echoing forward through time like ripples in water that never quite settle. The rebellion lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of fire and fury and freedom that folks still whisper about in the quarters, and the praise houses and the hush harbors scattered across the South. They took the big house first. Carried out food stores and blankets, tools and weapons, anything that might help the ones who chose to run. Then they set it ablaze. The flames climbed those white columns like judgment ascending to heaven, and the smoke rose black and thick against the Georgia sky, a signal visible for miles that something fundamental had shifted. Bella watched it burn from the yard, still weak but standing, the iron bar she'd killed Massa with gripped tight in her scarred hands. The heat felt like baptism, like purification, like every injustice committed in that house finally getting answered. They destroyed the cotton fields next. 70 years of labor, generations of suffering, all those white bowls that had soaked up enslaved blood and sweat, set alight. The fire spread fast through the dry plants, creating walls of flame that danced and roared like they were celebrating. Big Tom smashed the cotton gin with his sledgehammer, each blow a prayer and a curse both. Young Samuel broke every chain in the smithy, heated them red hot and twisted them into shapes that couldn't bind nobody never again. Mother Zara gathered herbs and roots from her garden before they set fire to the quarters too. Couldn't leave nothing standing that might be used to enslave again. Some of the enslaved folk scattered during this time, heading north with hope and terror mixing equal in their hearts. Others stayed, knowing what was coming but unable to tear themselves away from this brief taste of freedom. They sang spirituals loud enough to shake the heavens. Songs that had been sung in whispers now bellowed with full voice. Bella found herself in the cage one last time, not trapped inside but standing before it, looking at Massa Thorn's body still pinned to the iron. She reached up and touched the brand on her face, then touched the bloody bar that had pierced his heart. "It's done, Mama," she whispered. "The promise is kept." And in the smoke and firelight she swore she saw her mama's spirit standing beside her grandmother's, both of them smiling sad and proud. The militia arrived as the sun set, painting the burning plantation in shades of orange and red that looked like the end of the world, or maybe the beginning of a new one. 20 men on horseback, armed with rifles and righteousness, come to put down the rebellion and make examples. What they found stopped them cold. The plantation was already gone. Nothing but flames and fury and a group of enslaved folks standing in the center of it all, singing, not running, not hiding, standing and singing like they'd made peace with whatever came next. The militia captain, a man named Jessup who'd put down slave rebellions before, approached cautious. His eyes found Bella immediately, couldn't miss her, standing front and center with blood and soot covering her skeletal frame, that iron bar still in her hands. "You the one who killed Elias Thorn?" he demanded. "I'm the one who freed myself," Bella answered, voice carrying clear. Everything else just followed natural from that. "You'll hang for this. All of you who stayed will hang. I expect we will." She smiled, and it was terrible and beautiful at once. "But we'll hang having chosen our deaths, having lived free for 6 hours. That's more than most get." The militia didn't understand. How could they? They'd never been property, never been caged, never had to choose between surviving as a slave or dying as a human. But some of the enslaved folks watching from hiding in the woods, those who'd chosen flight over fight, they understood. And they'd carry the story. They'd tell about Bella of the Thorns, about the woman who survived 70 days in an iron cage and emerged unbroken, about how she killed her master with the very instrument of her torture. About 6 hours of rebellion that burned so bright it could be seen counties away. The hangings came 3 days later. They strung up 12 people from the old oak trees along the road leading to what used to be the Thorn plantation. Bella hung in the center, and even in death her eyes seemed to burn with that same fierce fire. But here's what the history books don't tell you. what only gets passed down in whispers and songs. Bella didn't scream, didn't beg. When they put the noose around her neck, she sang. Same song she'd sung in the cage, in that language older than English, calling to ancestors and descendants both. And folks say, though you can't prove such things, that when the trap dropped and her body should have gone slack, she stayed rigid for a moment, stayed upright like she was standing on something invisible, like the ancestors themselves were holding her up one last time. Then she let go, let death take her gentle like it was an old friend finally come calling. The others who hung beside her took strength from that, faced their death singing too, making sure the watching crowd, black and white both, understood that something had changed. You could kill the rebels, but not the rebellion. That lived on. Years passed. Decades. The Civil War came and went. Slavery officially ended, though freedom came with its own set of chains. But in the quarters and the praise houses, in the late-night gatherings where old folks passed down stories to young ones, Bella's story grew. They said her spirit walked the land where the Thorn plantation had stood. Said if you listened close on certain nights, you could hear iron creaking and a woman singing. Said the cage was never moved, never torn down. It just rusted away to nothing over the years, becoming part of the earth. But that the spot where it stood wouldn't grow nothing. Just bare red clay in the shape of those iron bars, permanent reminder of what happened there. They said that enslaved folks planning to run would sometimes see a thin woman with a brand on her face standing at crossroads, pointing north. Said she never spoke, but that her eyes told them everything they needed to know about courage and cost and choosing your own path. And they said, and this is what matters most, that every time an enslaved person refused to bow, every time someone chose resistance over submission, every time iron meant to bind became iron that freed, Bella's spirit was there, adding her strength to theirs, showing them that the cage could be broken, that suffering could be transformed into something sharp and deadly and true. So that's the story, children. That's why we remember Bella of the Thorns. Not because she won. She didn't. Not in ways the white folks would count as winning. But because she refused to lose on their terms. Because she turned her suffering into a weapon, and her cage into her oppressor's tomb. The iron that marked her became the iron that freed her. And that lesson, that the tools of oppression can be turned back on the oppressor. That's what lives on. In every act of resistance, every refusal to break, every moment when somebody decides that dying free is better than living bound. You hear that wind outside? Listen close. That's Bella singing still, calling to those who got ears to hear, reminding us that chains are made to be broken, that cages are temporary, that the human spirit, especially the spirit forged in suffering and tempered by resistance, that spirit can't be killed by rope or whip or 70 days of thorns. Who suffered, suffered. Who resisted, left memory, and memory we keep here in the echoes from the quarters, where the iron still sings, where the cage still stands in spirit, where Bella's promise, made in blood and kept in fire, echoes forward through generations, reminding us that freedom ain't given. It's taken. It's seized with scarred hands and unbroken will. It's sung into being by voices that refuse to be silenced. Now go on. Carry this story with you. Let it live in your chest like Bella's cold fire lived in hers. And when the time comes, and it always comes, when you got to choose between bowing and breaking, between submission and rebellion, between dying slow as property or dying quick as a person, well, you remember Bella of the Thorns. You remember the 70 days. You remember that the iron can turn,